CEEN Caribbean News. It's now time to go in depth. Jamaica Labour Party, JLP administration has exceeded 100 days at the helm of the country's administration. On this in depth, we examine the performance of the government during that crucial incubation period. To do so, we have been joined by political analyst Richard Crawford and financial analyst and CEO of the private sector organization of Jamaica, Dennis Chung. Welcome to In Depth, gentlemen.
Hi, good afternoon. Hi.
Now, Mr. Crawford, Mr. Crawford, what are your thoughts on the performance of the government during its first 100 days?
Well, the first thing I think is the government is quite fortunate. I think the people of Jamaica are trying their very best to give them an opportunity to see what will happen. That's one thing. How can I put it? They seem to be genuinely trying to do something. One of the things that I think that they have done, you said what is Andrew's first 100 days like, meaning more or less the government of Jamaica, right?
Yes.
I think they've done a few notable things, quite frankly, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in that area. They have certainly brought Trinidad to the table to talk. They had welcomed, which was a very welcome situation, with Venezuela and Cuba to try and solve certain problems there. So I thought that, and then we know because Camille Johnson-Smith, who was really started out rather well, also represented us at a UNGAS meeting at the United Nations to deal with the whole thing about changing the whole drug law. So that has been good. The government made an announcement about using the National Housing Trust more forcibly, certainly, to provide housing. I think that's a critical need for the country, housing and land and enhancing the land ownership policy in the country. So those are some pluses. I think that there are other things that you have to wait and see. It's kind of too early to pass judgment. I know this high-powered financial group that has been put together to stir growth. They've had a couple of meetings. It's too early to say whether it's going to work or it's not going to work or how it's going to work. But certainly I think that the two negatives so far that the government and certainly the Prime Minister has to address is this gap about his declaration of his assets, which is taking too long and hasn't been done, quite frankly. The other thing, of course, is that really their very weakest point is their inability to do one thing positive about the situation with crime in the country.
Okay. Now, Mr. Chung, what are your views on the JLP's first 100 days?
I think it's mixed. I think that certainly there has been an intent to show growth as a priority. But I think in some cases, because there is this great intent and the need for growth, we might have overstepped on certain things. For example, I don't think that the time was ready, in particular for the tax package as it was. I mean, as you see, we've caused some inflationary pressures. I just heard JPS say that this was one of the three factors also in terms of the new taxes that caused them to have to increase rates by about 13% in June. The matter of the housing trust, I certainly agree with Dickie. I think that's a great move. The intent to move from direct to indirect taxation definitely, I think, is a move in the right direction. The reinstatement of the Junior Stock Exchange benefits is also, I think, a signal achievement. And, you know, I would look at certain ministers and say that they've approached the thing properly. Christophe done definitely in health. I think he's approached it in a very practical way, the way he's going about it, and a way that, you know, is going to set him up for success, the way he has dealt with it. Desmond McKenzie, I think I showed clear intent in terms of how he wants to go. He's throwing down the gauntlet, and, you know, I like how he has been doing it. Johnson Smith, I would agree with Dickie on that one. I think that those would be my main ministers who I think have really showed the performance that I thought should be shown. I think that it's still early, 100 days, but certainly one of the things that I'm very disappointed about is the fact that some of the major boards have not been named. When you look at like the LHDs, the DBJs, we can't be running a country 4 to 5 months because you have to factor in the time from which you call the election and no decisions can be made. So it's mixed, there have been some good performances, there have been some lackluster. I don't think that we've seen enough yet to make a real determination as to how things are going to pan out. But I have confidence that we'll move forward. The Parliament is split 32 to 31. That means that there's a great role for the opposition to play also, and therefore a lot of the things that happen is not just dependent on government, but rather how does the opposition foster in Parliament. That also is going to be very critical.
Okay, now Mr. Crawford.
Yes.
The Prime Minister had promised in the election campaign that during his government's first 100 days, they'll begin the processes to set election dates, to institute impeachment proceedings in Parliament, and to institute term limits on the office of the Prime Minister. We haven't heard much, if anything, about these so far. Should we be concerned?
Yes, you have to be. He threw those out, I think, sometime before the election date, actually. And one really doesn't have a problem with some of those proposals put forward. In fact, I welcome them and I want the changes to be even more fundamental than that. I think it's time that we address the whole need for real serious constitutional reform in Jamaica. And allied to that, of course, is how we reform the bureaucratic process in this country, or rather really eliminate that and get a more action-oriented governmental management system in place. These things like impeachment, term limits, all of this are critical. The people are losing or have lost significant confidence in the political system. And one of the reasons is, of course, they have lost trust and faith and hope in many of the political people who have been there so long. So in order to bring about change, in order to have effective change, in order to drive production, the people have to be on board, and I believe that we have to change all the really out-of-date and unmanageable things that we have still cluttering up the place. So I'm all for those kinds of changes. And another one that Andrew Holness has announced, which I think some people have taken him to task, is about the change in the whole issue of the Bail Act. That is probably the one thing that he might have mentioned to address the problem of crime. But we have got to wake up and we have got to be serious. There's some significant things that have to be done and changes that have to be made if Jamaica is going to want to be successful.
Okay, now Mr. Chung, Mr. Crawford just mentioned a little bit about one thing that the administration has mentioned regarding crime. What else do you think needs to be done?
Well, for me, the biggest issue right now is crime. I don't think we can speak enough about that. The fact of the matter is that, people are fearful, and, the types of crime that we see committed, quick people are going to be questioning, should I go into business? Because, business people are being shut down. And what is very frightening for me about the crime also is that it is spilling over into the tourism industry. Because it's affecting foreigners. So that is a very, very, very big one for me. And, we have to find a way to deal with it. The matter of the bureaucracy, though, is another major issue, and the bureaucracy from the point of view that things are, you don't get a feeling that things are moving ahead in terms of public sector reform and public sector governance, which is going to be critical. So between inefficient government bureaucracy and crime and theft, you're talking about 32.4% of the most problematic factors to doing business as outlined by the Global Competitiveness Report. So those two are some really major issues that we need to address, and it seems as if we're groping in the dark on these issues. I don't think we're moving fast enough on them because it's a crisis that we need to address. I think that the matter of road fatalities, again, I think that's one I'd love to mention. That one is an issue, and we haven't seen the update to the traffic code being passed, and I'm wondering why it is taking so long. Because, it's one thing to say that the police is responsible for dealing with these things, but they're only reacting to issues that are out there. We have to put the legislative and the other infrastructure in place to deal with that. So, if we were to address those issues, the whole matter of indiscipline on the roads, the crime and the theft, the government practice, I think we go very far away in resolving some of the issues that we face. And, as I mentioned, the effect on tourism really is frightening, especially with Cuba opening up. So we have to keep that control.
Now, Mr. Crawford.
Yeah.
Do you think all these things that we've mentioned throughout the discussion, the crime, addressing the traffic situation, dealing with government bureaucracy, they have not been able to touch us within their first 100 days? Should there be a time limit on when all this should be done?
Yes. Well, they have. Listen, they're going to have to make a decision and put a lot of energy and effort on those problems. Whilst the economic realignment will take some time to come about, and you're going to work and try to push small and medium enterprises and production, that is a must. But if you don't tackle the problem of crime, and secondly, I think Dennis said it, allied to that is the horrendous what I call accident rate in the country. That's unbelievable. If those things are not dealt with, and if we can't bring some order and out of the chaos in the country, then everything that the government wishes to do could just not happen. So this is not a matter of whether we like it or not. These are certain imperatives that must be tackled. You have to put the energy there, have to put the effort there, and those things have got to be dealt with.
All right, that's it for In Depth. Thank you so much for joining us, Mrs. Crawford and Chung.
Okay.
We were just joined by political analyst Richard Crawford and CEO of the private sector organization of Jamaica, Dennis Chung, analyzing the first 100 days of the government in Jamaica.